Hello, everybody. Dave Neal here, stand-up comic, host of Bachelorette Recap, a Guys Review. Katie Thurston's third episode premieres tonight. I'll be doing a 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time live stream. So if you're on the East Coast, you can catch that at 7 p.m., an hour before the show. We'll just talk about the upcoming episode. We'll chat. And then I'll be doing a 10 p.m. Pacific Standard live stream. So if you're watching on the West Coast, we can chat after the show. In the meantime, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, and let's get right into it. As you can see from the photo here, we're talking about Whit and Rye. Whit and Rye had Reality Steve on their YouTube channel here to talk about the controversy around his misogynistic writing from the past that it was again unearthed this year. People thinking it problematic, and also a conversation he had with Demi, a former contestant on the show, where he now realizes he might have used his position of power as somebody who can slander a contestant and shift a narrative about them, and then he actually sent her messages about his sex dream that he had about her. So we're going to talk about this. Whit and Rye, of course, if you don't know them, you should. They are very charming sisters from Atlanta, Georgia. They recap the show. Now listen, this is where I understand it gets a little meta, right? Like, I'm here as a recapper, recapping two other recappers of the show. But there's teachable moments here. There's my audience that's not all the same as Whit and Rye's. So there's a chance for us to have a conversation. Even though I'm not invited to the party, I can at least comment on it. So I'm only going to play a couple minutes of their video. I don't want to steal any views. So after this, go give them a like, watch their content, watch the advertising, do all the things you got to do to support content creators, of course, and we'll get right into it. Before we do get started, I will say, if you do want to join the membership-only community, I just released a new Patreon stand-up comedy set that I did Friday night at a backyard Los Angeles stand-up comedy show. It was a ton of fun. This past month, we went from 22 Patreon members to 116, so thank you guys so much for all that support. It's paying the bills. It really helps the content creation. So that's a fun set that I had. It's a quick 10-minute set. You can go watch that if you want to laugh, and that's on Patreon. And if you didn't check out this video from Saturday, which not many people did because, it was Saturday, I've got a Katie Thurston throwing out a first pitch at the Seattle Mariners game, and I analyzed it as I pitch-splained my experience as someone who has pitched for 30 years. That means I'm getting old. So I explained what she did right and some techniques she used, and how she actually did a better job than President Obama, 50 Cent, and Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of all time. She threw the full 60 feet 6 inches and then some, and had a lot of torque and energy behind her. So go watch that video. It was a ton of fun, pitch-splaining the whole process there. We got into the nitty-gritty. All right, so let's go back to Reality Steve. He's being grilled by Whit and Rye. Clearly, they have a past. They've had a professional sort of working relationship as influential people in the Bachelor community. But Whit and Rye do a really good job of holding him to some questions, and he himself does a good job of, trying to talk it out. Here's the thing. Of course, apologies have to come when you've done problematic things, but I actually would prefer someone trying to talk it out as to why something happened, which might sound like an excuse, but I prefer that over just saying, there's no excuses, I'm sorry for what I did. Yeah, no, that's the given. Now let's talk about what that society was that let that happen, because that's important to move forward. All right, so let's just play a few minutes of this, and you can watch the whole clip over there at Whit and Rye's channel. As you can see, Whit and Rye, there's a channel right there. You can go watch that. All right, here we go. Reality Steve, you're up.
Steve, do you feel like you've been canceled?
No. I do believe that if I didn't work for myself and I wasn't my own employer, and what happened, and I was writing for like another website, just name any website, and I was writing for them, and when they hired me, I never informed them of my past writings, and then this stuff came up, I believe I would have been fired. Yeah. I think one thing that was also a little bit different was I don't have a pay service. Like, if my stuff was behind a paywall, I think people would be like, oh, I'm not subscribing to him anymore, I'm going to unsubscribe. But I don't. Everything, I provide a free service for people that they can choose to look at or not. So I just assume that people are still going to want to hear spoilers.
When we did your podcast last week, you mentioned that you had taken down the misogynistic writings that you had done, and just now you mentioned 7 or 8 years ago. When was the last time that you wrote in that tone that was offensive?
I mean, it's tough to pinpoint a date or a season, but I believe it was 2016.
That wasn't that long ago, but did you erase whatever it was in 2016?
Yeah. Everything that I've written pre 2016 up to 2016 is now eliminated, is now off my site. It's not there.
I feel like social media now is holding us accountable in a way that we never had to be held accountable before. Do you agree?
For sure. Oh yeah, for sure. And I've thought about this a lot. Obviously, in the last 2 months, there's a lot that's been going on. And my biggest thing has always been not only why was I allowed to say that? I mean, obviously, you're allowed to say anything you want, but why was it accepted? And why wasn't I? Why did people come down on me hard back then when I was saying it? And the bottom line is, and this isn't an excuse, but the bottom line was this was more accepted in 2013 and 2012 and 2014. It just was.
Now, this is something people will have blowback on. Reality Steve saying this was more accepting. Now, we have to look at this and say, that doesn't mean it was right, but was it more accepting? Did the social media sort of not really exist in the way where people were able to rally together? It was more accepting. We just have to speak facts. It doesn't make it right. It just means the people that are now voicing their opinions were not voicing them in that sort of level that would get you fired or canceled. That just is how it was. So as he says, he's not making any excuses, and you have to like really double down and say, I'm not making any excuses, but if this wasn't acceptable, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have gone on so long. So to there, you have to understand, like, as we're being like, if we're thinking as critical as possible about this, that the problem did exist, but it didn't exist at the threshold where people were like, okay, all right, this is ridiculous. It did on a lower level, but not enough to get someone to necessarily alter their course.
In the public and in the media, you were allowed to get away with some nasty, awful things. We talked about it on my podcast, the stuff that Perez Hilton would say, the stuff that the Superficial would post. What would Tyler Durden do?
So Perez Hilton, Superficial, Tyler Durden, these were people that were making a ton of money with very inflammatory commentary. And then when we look at, like, if you've seen the recent Britney Spears documentary on Hulu, you're looking at, and correct me if I'm wrong, Barbara Walters, like primetime news people were slut shaming and saying some crazy things that you would not get away with in today's world to Britney Spears. We had this kind of idea with celebrity that they didn't have to be treated as humans because they were above us on some sort of platform, which is completely wrong. We were nowhere near where we needed to be with understanding how bad social media was to the mental health of people. We're still sort of like understanding all that. But yeah, this sort of like entitled point of view that writers had, snarky, misogynistic, this was absolutely running rampant in like early social media just a couple years ago. So for people to say, oh, come on, it was 2016, didn't we know better? Well, it wasn't deleted until 2021. I'm not saying it wasn't wrong.
That website where it was just nothing but taking celebrity stories and objectifying the women. And it was just,
and mostly the women were the ones who fell victim.
Yeah.
To that.
And it's like, why? I mean, obviously the Me Too movement is what put an end to it, for sure. Back in the day, when I read those things and I saw the things, resurfaced of the stuff that I wrote, it's so cringeworthy and it's so embarrassing and so awful that you're just like, the only thing you can respond to it is like, I guess I'm just so glad that's not me anymore. And but when I'm writing it, I'm trying to it's very hard to put yourself back 8 or 9 years ago and think, what was I thinking at that moment when I said these things? There's no way to get an answer to that. But for me, the short answer would be like, I was just going along with the cool kids, I was just going along with the crowd because it was accepted. And to me, that humor was like edgy and got people to talk about things because that's what all the blogs were doing. And that's the only answer. It's a horrible answer. It doesn't make it right, but that's the short answer. If we're going to dive deeper into it, I guess it was just like, I just didn't know any better. Nobody ever told me there was something wrong with that,
Well, Steve, come on, I was with you until that last part. No, I mean, you're right. It's a lame excuse. What the excuse that you gave, it's a lame excuse. And you acknowledge this is a lame excuse. I shouldn't have done that. But then to say, I didn't know any better. Yes, you did. You're a good human being. You know how to treat other human beings and how to not call women out for things they shouldn't be called out for and make comparisons to be made. I
do now. I don't think I knew back then because nobody told me otherwise.
You were in your 30s, Steve.
I was in my 30s, but I had the humor of a 20-year-old.
Like now, I like that they're pressing him. You were in your 30s. You knew better. And he's saying, clearly I didn't. Clearly I didn't know better, So you have to like respect them pushing him, But you also have to respect in some way him saying, look, let's talk about it. Let's talk about that society, that platform, the way this was done. There are plenty of examples, myself included, of people that have changed the way they talk about the show, that have changed the way they talk about these peoples as humans versus just commodities to a punchline.
That was the thing. Like I was doing it not knowing or not even thinking, because it was just accepted. And my question is, why was it accepted? Why wasn't like if I put it this way, if I were to write that right now, everybody that reads my blog would be emailing me within 4 seconds of it going up.
There's more of an awareness now, of course, like because.
So it was accepted, not by everybody, but because there wasn't a critical mass of people saying, hey, what? You know what I mean? Like there was a power structure that wasn't being dented. People weren't being canceled. As soon as people understood, oh, we can contact if we don't like the way something's done, we can contact the advertisers. We can do X, Y, and Z. At that point, people started realizing, oh, like, there was plenty of communities, the people that have been against the use of the R word, the certain slurs around the trans community. There were plenty of examples where people said in the last 5 to 7 years, oh, no. We're a coalition of people. We're going to like almost unionize our forces to say, we're not accepting of this, and we're going to boycott products from people that are using either this terminology, this slang, or whatever it may be. So that's something that's happened in the last, probably 7 to 8 years, 10 years, where you've got musicians like the Black Eyed Peas. They had a song, Let's Get Retarded. That was the name of the song. Then they changed it to Let's Get It Started. You can still listen to the first version of that song on Spotify. And there was literal organizations of people that were like, no, we're not using that word in this way any longer, and we're going to fight, and they got it changed. And that's just something that says, well, how many people were writers and worked for the Black Eyed Peas and a record execs? I mean, how far up did it need to go in that example for that to get approved? You don't just like sing a song at an open mic and then that got approved by dozens, if not hundreds of people, and then the public's like, no. And that was enough to be like, yeah. No, okay, we get it. We understand now. We're you know what I mean? So to think, I mean, there's example after example where, now, come on, Steve, you're a good guy. That's just, you're a good guy isn't a good enough reason to wonder why someone didn't do better.
Me too, as you mentioned, but unfortunately, this story is not new for most women. A man using misogynistic language, slut shaming in some type of powerful role, using that to his advantage to flirt or engage, befriend. Not new. Yeah, not new. But then since this all blew up with the Demi stuff, what in your opinion was the most egregious of your actions? All
right, so we have an advertisement coming up. So they're going to get into the Demi part, and then I'm going to play that, and then I'm going to let you guys watch the rest over there, because I don't want to ball hog on their very great interview that they're doing. Like I said, guys, if there was a world in which everyone decided we're not going to hear from Reality Steve any longer, you might like that world. But I tell you what, it's not as good as hearing this conversation. It's not as good as hearing people talk about where they come from, why they thought a certain way. So you can think a lot of people will boil down this interview saying, Whit and Rye looks great. And they did. And a lot of people say, but Reality Steve looked like he hasn't learned a lesson. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. But it's important to understand the framework of where he's coming from versus just saying, you know what, off with his head. How about off with the structure that let this happen, and let's digest how that was. So when we see that rising up in different ways, we can knock it down like a little, the little gopher game at the, with the soccer. What's that game called? You know what I mean? The gopher. Okay. So anyway, let's just hear the Demi part, and then I'll get you out of here.
I think what I wrote was, look, and you're asking me for an answer, and I don't want that answer to mean like I'm diminishing the Demi stuff. You're just asking me for an answer to choose between the two. And I'm answering the question honestly. I think because those were repeated over years and years. The Demi was literally a one-time incident, and her and I don't believe have had more than 5 texts since that ever happened, 9 months ago. It's not like this was a continuous thing. It was a one-time thing that never should have happened. Those writings went on for years. I mean, that's what realitysteve.com was from the beginning up until around that time.
Yeah. Well, for us, it's obviously easy for us to put ourselves in her position, because in one way or another, we have been in that position where we've been made to feel a certain way by men, etc. growing up, becoming the amazing women we are. Obviously, that's not the case for you. You're a man. You've never dealt with this before, and you were the perpetrator here who made the creepy sort of phone call. So when you reflect now, having heard her accusation and then her reaction to your apology, where do you guys stand right now?
There's no stance. Once she came out with it, I texted her an apology and heard nothing. So there's nothing.
Oh, so she's never directly responded to you personally?
No.
All right.
She'll go on podcasts and give her opinion on me and my apology and everything that happened. But
she's allowed to do that.
She hasn't acknowledged publicly or privately my apology to her.
I kind of get that.
I do too. You can't blame her for that.
It seems to me that people's view of you overall is that you are a creepy, lecherous man who doesn't respect women. Like, this is what I feel like most people feel about you. And
after this, that was never brought up before the Demi stuff. Yeah. And then Brian, and then Mike made a comment about, basically calling me, it was either Mike or Brian, one of the two, because it came from that podcast. Actually, you know what? It might've been Joe. I think it was Joe on Clickbait podcast, Grocery Joe. Just calling me a loser because I'm a 45-year-old guy, well, now 46, that spoils the Bachelor for a living. Like, if you're gonna define me that way, like put me into a box like that, like that's all I do is I'm a 45-year-old guy that spoils the Bachelor. He's like, what a loser that guy is. Like, what kind of life does this guy have? It's like, Joe, you've never read anything that I've ever done. You've never listened to any of the 239 podcasts that I've done. Like, I'm a little bit more than that. So to just pigeonhole me into loser 45-year-old that covers the show, I could call you a loser back for going on the show. Like, what are you, you're a sixth grader with you're a loser for writing about the show?
Do you have a sister? I think you do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what has your sister said about this and about, calling a woman and sharing, like, not a fantasy, it was a dream, but sharing this kind of intimate sort of X-rated situation?
I think she just wanted to let me have my space. I guess
I'm going to leave it there. I want to get you guys over to their channel to watch it if you haven't already. So what we've got is a scenario where there's multiple layers. Like most things in life. Dave, why are your videos so long? Why is your video longer than the interview itself? Because there's multiple layers. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. He can be both defensive at Grocery Store Joe and also apologetic for the way he acted. I'm sure if he could go back in time, he would have learned his lesson sooner, deleted his misogynistic post from his site. The truth is, everything happens for a reason. He decided to leave it up. I think even after being called out, and then it kind of got unearthed again, where people got into the real specifics of people on Reddit saying oh, you said this, the timeline, which is always bad when it's all put together like that, of course. He's going to have to dig himself out of it and learn to do better. And that's going to be part of his retribution story. It is very fascinating. And this is advice for everybody. Even if you feel like you are the most open-minded, nice, progressive person in the world. If he worked for a company, he would have been fired. And it's just a reminder that your cancel culture doesn't work for people that are in reality Steve's position. I mean, if he does something horrible, there can be bigger campaigns against him. But for the most part, it's not all right, we can get 100 people to have a coalition to write to Jezebel, because he writes for Jezebel in this fictitious story I'm making up, and then Jezebel can fire him from their blog. No. That can't happen. That can't happen with him. He's still under free speech, and he's still doing what he's doing and saying what he's saying, but it doesn't mean you can't put pressure on somebody to realize what they did wrong. He's stated it over and over about the misogynistic behavior. He realizes that what he did was wrong, and he's trying to explain how that scenario in that world was created. And I think, when you look at who Howard Stern used to be as a shock jock, a lot of these shock jocks, even on terrestrial radio, Opie and Anthony, you can't get away with those things anymore. They were doing bananas things on their radio programs. They were doing crazy things. Even on Sirius XM, you can't do that anymore, which is, not ruled by the FCC. So there's just a world that has changed and evolved in the very short past, with people kind of collecting their voices together, and I really do appreciate Whit and Rye for having this conversation. Their YouTube channel doesn't need to have it. They probably got some backlash for even having him on, and they don't need that, and they still did it. And they were able to conduct an interview, set boundaries, and, having had a working relationship with Reality Steve, in which they do say later on in the video that that relationship has always been professional, they're able to speak on behalf of victims and women, saying, "Look, we've all experienced this misogynistic behavior in one way or another, and it's not okay, and it's wild to them to think that it ever was okay." And the truth is, it was never okay. It was just never called out in this sort of public forum that we now have. So it's good that they're cleaning shop. It's good that call-out culture is good in the sense that it's good for people to realize their wrongs. But at the same time, we have to operate in a society where do we go moving forward? Reality Steve, he's not going to lose his website. He's going to still spoil things, and he's going to still do his thing. So rather than have him be the enemy, how do you hold him accountable to do better moving forward? The show will be around for years to come. I'm sure Reality Steve will be around for years to come. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here. He has changed his writing style. So he did show that he will change the way he has showed learning and growth there. I mean, you have to give him that. He has deleted all of his stuff up into and including 2016. And Whit and Rye agree that social media accountability is something that hasn't existed before. So for anyone who was never a content creator back in the day, maybe either A, you were always squeaky clean, or B, just no one knows what you used to say. I was talking to my fiance, Tasha, about this, and she says she used to love reading Perez Hilton, even though it was so viscerally jarring. And as someone who works in entertainment as an actor and a model, she has to reckon with the imprint it's left on her, wondering if she does things, how she's going to be criticized for her body, for everything that comes with what, the criticisms women face that men don't. That's something I can't completely understand as a guy, but I can still empathize with the fact that there's a different standard set there. There's a different standard set, not just in the Bachelor universe, but just in the entertainment world in general. So if you haven't checked out that Britney Spears documentary on Hulu, it's eye-opening to see how radio disc jockeys, big-time news reporters, just how they slut-shamed Britney Spears, and B, kind of let Justin Timberlake off the hook and let him sort of, act in a way that was pretty bad, pretty ugly stuff, just a couple years back. With regards to the point where Reality Steve was saying how grocery store called him a loser 45-year-old, you can really see that there's defensiveness there to be like, Joe, who are you? Who are you, Joe? You're profiting off of the same, just like I am, just like Whit and Rye are, profiting off of the same franchise. Like we're all lecherous in a way. Aren't we? This is the stream we've decided to mine. So the question becomes, how do we all coexist in this sort of family that's clearly never going to see completely eye to eye, but maybe, can hold each other to the best intentions? I'd love to know what you guys think. Please let me know. Let me know what you think. Feel free to share your mind. Just be respectful of others in the comment section. I always say this, while you can say however you feel in the comment section, you'll never win somebody's opinion over by being rude or harassing them. So just keep it kind and respectful in the comment section. Let me know what you think of this retribution of Reality Steve, the conversation between Whit and Rye. Maybe Reality Steve thought it was going to be a little more chummy, but I'm pretty sure he knew they were going to go in hard on him. And I think it's important for him too that they go in hard on him, that they show that they're asking the right and the tough questions and giving him a chance to explain. And let's just differentiate excuses from explanation. In the court of law, you can plead guilty with explanation. Yes, Your Honor, I drove drunk at 2 a.m., but I'm guilty with explanation. My mom leg got cut open and we couldn't get through to 911. Whatever the case may be. Okay, that's a stupid analogy, or a stupid example. But you understand. I'd rather hear Reality Steve's explanation than just have him say, "Shut up and apologize." You know what I mean? So that's just where I am. I think that's where we need to be in society to untangle these Christmas cords. Let me know what you guys think. Live stream 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I've got other YouTube content, the Patreon, all that out there. So go check that out. Thanks again. If you go watch Whit and Rye's video, tell them you saw my video over here. Maybe someday I'll get to collab with them. I don't know what questions I would ask Reality Steve if I talked to him, other than, as a comic, I understand the idea of trying to go for a joke. A little different in Reality Steve's scenario, but understand the idea of trying to go for a joke, flatlining, getting called out for it. It's a tightrope that you walk. Now I don't know if I don't read his stuff. I don't know if he finds himself funny in this sort of comedian type of way or jarring, shock jock, whatever the case may be. You're over there just trying to get a response out of someone. What he's learned, and a lot of other people have, is that just getting a response isn't always good enough, and you have to understand the human on the other side of that conversation. And in some cases, you play with fire, you're going to get burned. He's realized it. He's changing. We're going to keep an eye on him. Like we're going to keep an eye on all of us. We're just going to be here trying to educate, inform, entertain, and have fun. Right, guys? That's what we're trying to do. Leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. We'll see you guys a little later on this afternoon.